I used to think my father was a failure. It's painful to admit that now, but when I was younger, that's exactly what I believed. While my classmates' fathers wore suits, drove nice cars, and showed up to school events looking successful, my father came home every evening covered in dust, sweat, and exhaustion. His hands were rough from years of hard labor, and his clothes always smelled of concrete and rust. Some nights he was so tired that he fell asleep in his chair before finishing dinner. Back then, I didn't see sacrifice. I saw weakness. We lived in a tiny apartment where every dollar mattered. The lights were never left on in empty rooms, and the heater stayed low during winter. My father patched holes in old shoes instead of buying new ones. Birthdays were simple, holidays were modest, and vacations were something I only saw in television commercials. I remember wondering why life seemed so unfair, why every other family appeared to have more than we did, and why my father worked harder than anyone I knew but never seemed to get ahead. As I grew older, that frustration slowly turned into resentment. I blamed him for everything we didn't have, for the embarrassment I felt wearing old clothes while everyone else wore new ones, for never taking days off, and for never giving me the childhood I thought I deserved. Looking back now, I realize I never once asked what his life was like. I only cared about mine. One afternoon, everything changed in a way I didn't understand until years later. It happened during my final year of high school, when the teacher announced that every student needed the same advanced textbook for an important university entrance course. Without it, passing the class would be nearly impossible. The book cost $20. To most families, $20 wasn't much, but to us, it was everything. That evening, I watched my father quietly empty his pockets onto the kitchen table. A few coins rolled across the surface, and a handful of crumpled bills lay beside them. $20. That was all he had. I didn't know it then, but it was every dollar he owned until payday. I remember feeling angry, not because he couldn't buy the book, but because I couldn't understand why life had to be this way. The next morning, I left for school disappointed, convinced I would have to tell my teacher I couldn't afford the textbook. When I got home that evening, the book was sitting on my bed, brand new. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. I never stopped to ask how my father managed to buy it. I simply assumed he had figured something out. Children rarely question love when it quietly solves their problems. The following months passed quickly. I studied harder than I ever had before, and that textbook became the foundation of everything I learned. Eventually, I earned a scholarship to university. Then another opportunity came, and then another. Years passed, and I built a successful career. I bought my own house, traveled the world, and achieved everything I had dreamed about as a child. People often congratulated me for my discipline and determination. They called me self-made, and I believed them. Then one phone call changed everything. My father had passed away. By the time I arrived at his apartment, the place looked exactly as I remembered. Small, simple, quiet, almost untouched by time. As I sorted through his belongings, I expected to find very little. Old work boots, a worn jacket, family photographs, receipts, bills, nothing valuable. Then I opened an old metal toolbox hidden beneath his bed. Inside were neatly folded papers tied together with faded string. Curious, I began reading them. Most were ordinary receipts for groceries, rent, utility bills, and work equipment. Then one receipt caught my attention. It was from the bookstore. $20. The date immediately felt familiar. It was the day before that textbook appeared on my bed. I smiled for a moment, then noticed something attached behind it. A receipt from a nearby diner for one coffee, 95 cents. Nothing else. At first, I didn't understand. Then I found another receipt, one coffee, the next day. Then another, and another. 5 days, 6 days, 7 days. Every receipt was exactly the same. One small coffee, no breakfast, no lunch, no dinner, just coffee. My hands began to shake as I searched deeper through the papers. Hidden between them was an old notebook. Inside, my father had carefully written every expense, every dollar he earned, every dollar he spent, every unpaid bill, every sacrifice. Then I found the page that changed my life forever. Beside that week's expenses, he had written one sentence: buying the book was more important than eating. I stared at those words for what felt like hours. Suddenly, memories I had forgotten came rushing back. I remembered him telling me he wasn't hungry, saying he had already eaten at work, and sitting there sipping coffee while I finished a full dinner. I believed him every single time. He hadn't eaten, not because there wasn't enough food, but because he wanted there to be enough for me. The $20 on that table had never been extra money. It had been the choice between feeding himself or investing in my future, and he never hesitated. I broke down, not because my father was gone, but because I finally understood the man I had spent years judging. Everything I had achieved, every promotion, every award, every opportunity, every success people credited to me, had been built on sacrifices I never even noticed. While I spent years wishing my father could give me more, he had quietly been giving me everything, just not in ways I understood. That day, I realized something I wish I had learned much sooner. The greatest acts of love are often invisible. Real love doesn't always arrive wrapped in expensive gifts or spoken through beautiful words. Sometimes it looks like worn-out work boots, tired hands, or pretending you're not hungry so someone else can eat. Today, I earn more in a single day than my father once earned in weeks. I can buy anything I wanted as a child, but there is one thing I would give everything I own to have. One more dinner with the man who convinced me he wasn't hungry. One more chance to thank him. One more opportunity to tell him that the $20 he spent all those years ago became worth far more than any fortune I would ever earn. Because that wasn't the last $20 my father owned. It was the first investment he ever made in my future, and it became the most valuable investment anyone has ever made in my life.